I found this video that I had uploaded to Zoom, and so thought I would share that as the background today. This was actually one of our leases this time last year. Actually, no, it was November of last year. And at that point in time, we were already feeding quite a bit of hay. We were actually gathering at that when I took this video to wean our calves off our 2020 calf crop. So anyway, I found it and I just thought I would share with you guys some of the rangeland that we run on. So it's not a great representation of it, but if you look kind of back towards the skyline, we've got we're in a juniper sagebrush steppe ecosystem. And so that stuff in the foreground is antelope bitterbrush, which is a shrub that actually blooms out right now. So it's really yellow and it's very pretty and it smells good right now. And then back as you move up into the foothills, you'll start seeing low sage. So a sagebrush variety that is smaller in stature, that's more common out here in the West. And then we've also got quite a bit of juniper in there as well. And so in between all that, perennial grasses should be growing, but what is actually growing is actually cheatgrass. And so it is a weird dynamic from an ecological perspective, because the cheatgrass and the medusa head that have invaded this ecosystem, and there's somebody on a four-wheeler, is an annual grass. And so you guys are going to learn about the differences between perennials and annuals this week. But that perennial grass base has really been chased out of this ecosystem. And part of it is due to overgrazing before we got the property 20 years ago. Part of it is due to a lack of deep water or deep soil water for those perennial grasses to survive. And part of it is because we're seeing junipers take over and really kind of take out all of those deeper water sources. And so that really only leaves topsoil moisture for those annual grasses to flourish. So we're pretty lucky. This piece of property hasn't succumbed to fire. We haven't had a fire on it yet. Had a couple get close, but so we aren't dealing with invasive species from that perspective. But just to kind of look at the cows, again, this was last year. They were pretty skinny coming off rangeland. And so that's why we had started feeding cows at this point in time. And so there's not a lot out there. There's a whole bunch of ground right around where the cows are standing that is bare and just dirt. And that's our sacrificial ground so that we feed on. And yeah, so anyway, this is just some video from last year. I thought I would throw it up. It's kind of fun to look at. So, all right. So as far as today, I was all excited to put some questions and stuff together. And then I got on email, and one of the weekly messages, actually daily messages that I get is from the Public Lands Council, and their meeting, or their annual meeting, is virtual this week. I was supposed to be at it and present at it earlier this month, and they had to cancel it because it was going to be in Oregon. But so that's just one of the industry trade publications that I get newsletters about every week. And so as I was going through everything that's going on in Washington, D.C., two things came up that I really want us to talk about. And so we're going to do that as soon as we get done going through Blackboard. I'm going to actually push you guys to breakout rooms, have you read these articles, and then discuss it among your group, and then bring it back at the end. And we're just going to give a really short presentation to each other about your issue. And so that's what we've got on the docket for today. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll talk through Blackboard and what's going on this week first. All right, so in Our ecology class, we are into week 6. And so last week you guys talked about ecological components and functions. And so keep that in mind. You may want to, if you're sitting in front of a laptop, you may want to bring those notes up for the discussion about these 2 issues we're going to talk about. But now we're really starting to dive at a deeper level into individual attributes of that bigger ecosystem. And so this week is all about plants. And so I used to be one of those students that was like, plants, my goodness, I don't want to learn about them. They aren't interesting. They just sit there and grow. Give me animals. They're so much more fun. And as I've gotten into this range world, I've really come to enjoy learning new stuff about plants. And so it's a really essential part of the ecology, right? If you don't have plants, you don't have anything to feed cattle. You don't have anything to protect the topsoil. You don't have anything to die so that foliage can get inserted back into the soil. And so vegetation is a really huge component of that ecological system. And so as we move into thinking about how we manage different types of vegetation, we first have to know what they are, how they grow, the differences in how they grow among ecosystems, and then the different parts of the plant, but also the different ways that individual plants actually survive and thrive. And so this week we are not only looking at rangeland plant types, but we're also looking at morphology, which for those of you guys in the animal science world, you can kind of think of that as anatomy. Okay, so plant morphology is equivalent to animal anatomy. And then we're also going to dive into plant physiology. So what is going on inside the plant from a chemical perspective, from a growth perspective, from a photosynthetic perspective. And so you guys have the opportunity to work through those online lectures and note guides, and then you'll take a quiz about plant type morphology and physiology before Friday at end of day. And then I also wanted to throw in here on Wednesday for a lab, we're going to have a guest speaker. So Dr. Sam Seward is a new professor in the Department of Computer Science. And he is actually coming back at the end of his career, or the mid part to the end of his career, to Chico State. He's done a lot of work at University of Colorado in Boulder with some pretty cool satellite technology and software. And so he and I have been in conversation over the last 3 or 4 months about how to use satellite images to manage rangeland and manage livestock. So our conversations have been really cool. I've learned a lot from him. And so we're getting ready to put some sensors and stuff into not necessarily at the range yet, we'll get to that point, but on beef cows and in the beef cattle pastures at the university farm this week. So he's going to share with us kind of what his technology looks like. And so that is Wednesday's lab. So please be here, please be on time. And then there's a guest speaker assignment associated with that. So take a look at that guest speaker assignment between now and Wednesday, so you have an idea of what data to capture during lab. All right, so we got a quiz and that guest speaker assignment that is due this week. So, all right, any questions on due dates and what is due this week? All right, great. So I'll share with you my screen really quickly and I'm just going to show you this this listserv that I'm on for Public Lands Council. And so this is something that comes every single day. Public Lands Council has a really large presence in Washington, D.C. So they are an organization that lobbies on behalf of advocates for public lands. So this can be ranchers, this can be wildlife advocates. This can be Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. They are just pro public lands usage and management. And so they every day they send this out and tell us a little bit about what's going on the White House agenda, what's happening in the Senate, and what's happening in the House of Representatives. And then the part that I really have come to enjoy is the daily statistics during the summer about fire. So we tend to know what's going on in California, but we tend to lose track of what's actually going on in the rest of the US. And so this gives you kind of a breakdown of how many other fires are in other states. And if we look at states in the West, we of course have a ton of fires here in the West. Also, every day they will break down and update its members and its readers about what some of the issues that are going on. And so 2 issues that caught my attention today are this review, revise, repeat. Biden to set to restore the pre-Trump regulations on critical habitat designation. And so one of the groups is going to take that article, and I'll come in and paste it into your individual chat. You guys will have the opportunity to read through that. And then the other thing that came up is that it doesn't happen every day, but California ends up on this listserv. And so there is some conservation issues that are coming back up with the Biden administration after they were kind of handled. And I thought we made progress during the Trump administration from an ecological perspective, but now they're being revisited. And so anyway, it'll be interesting to get your guys' take on this. So I'm not, I don't want to get too much into the politics of this today. What I want to keep in mind is how this affects the ecology, because at the end of the day, that is what we're concerned about, especially in this class, is how the ecology of the land is being affected. All right, so I'm going to drop some quick instructions into the chat. Okay, and before I push you guys to 2 breakout rooms, 1 for each of these issues, what I would like you guys to do is I'm going to give you 20 minutes to read through the article. It's not that long, and then discuss it as a group. And through your discussion, somebody just keep notes about the pros, the cons, and most importantly, what are part of the ecological components and functions that you guys studied about last week that could be affected by these changes. All right, and then we're going to come back and we're going to share it together as a class. So each group is going to get a chance to present. All right, any questions? All right, I'm going to take that as we're good. So I'm setting the time in the breakout rooms for 20 minutes. Okay, I will come into each breakout room and drop your link into the chat. Okay, so, and all the rooms should be opened up. So go ahead and head to your respective room, and I will join here in just a second. Hi guys, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so I think, nope, it did not do it. Hang on. All right. So there's the link to your guys's article. You are gonna take on kind of the critical habitat designation issue. Okay, so again, read through it, discuss it as a group, and come up with pros, cons, and what ecological functions and components are going to be affected. Everybody good?
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Sorry, guys. Takes me a minute to get my screens figured out. Okay, so here is the article that was, or the second article about the topic that we're gonna talk about. So just as a reminder, spend some time reading through this, discussing it as a group, come up with a good list of pros and cons, and most importantly, the ecological components that are gonna be affected if this legislation passes. All right, everybody good? Just give me a thumbs up or go ahead and talk to me. That works too.
Yeah, I think we're
Thank you.
good.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome. We'll see you guys after a bit. Do we know our rooms? So is,
We're still working on ours. Can you give us a few minutes?
Yeah, we were too. Sorry, Dr. Diaby.
okay, what about room 2? Are you guys ready to
That's-
roll?
Well, we have some down. We were still working on a few of the pros. We had some that were like pros and cons together. So could be a pro, could be a con kind of
That's
thing. And we
okay.
were kind of working on like wording those, like our thoughts down on paper.
Okay. So you guys were room 2, Cheyenne. So what about room 1? Where are you guys at?
I think we're good.
Awesome. All right, John, go ahead and take it away. Do you need screen share ability or are you guys good?
I don't know. Do you want me to screen share right now?
Sure. Let me go ahead and change that. Okay. Feel free to.
Okay. So our pros for this article are that habitat designations will provide relief to declining suitable habitats.
Okay, hold on. Just a really quick second, John. So the other group has no idea what you guys talked about. Can you introduce
Oh,
the
shoot. I
issue?
thought we were all doing the same article.
No. We got 2 different ones going.
Okay. So our article was about Biden setting to restore pre-Trump regulations on critical habitat designation. So what this means was previously under the Trump administration that certain areas were not designated. So you were able to like come in and develop these areas. And now that now that Biden's in office, he wants to go back on these regulations and institute them again so that these areas, you just can't build on them and they're protected for wildlife habitats. And then, is that good enough summary?
Sure.
Okay.
What maybe what are some of the specific issues or species that are, well, you guys will probably cover it in pros and cons. So
they didn't
it's
have
okay.
they didn't have specific species. They're just talking about endangered species
Okay,
and then the habitats they might live in.
cool.
So under this article though, a lot of these areas like aren't even habitable, but they still want to designate them as like you can't build on them. So let me just go through our pros and cons. So with the pros of the legislation being passed, these designations will provide relief to declining suitable habitats. And this allows these areas to become habitable in the future. The failure to designate would not result in the extinction of the species that they're concerned about. And with the criteria for critical habitat designation to be relaxed, we can expect the services to designate more areas as critical habitat than the prior administration. The cons we thought with this legislation were that that the definition that the services came up with is kind of vague. It doesn't really specify exactly what is habitable and what is not habitable. And then increasing these designations will result in delay in infrastructure projects because developers aren't going to want to come and invest a bunch of money where it's kind of iffy whether or not they're going to be able to build on it. And another con that we came up was that the habitat that they are designating isn't even habitable for the species. These areas that are being designated for preservation have resources that could be used by the public. The habitat is changing because of climate change, and it's just not enough criteria. I don't know what that one was. Sorry about the kind of are affected ecological components. That is that the habitats are important for ecological systems, and if they are not sustained properly, could lead to loss of more species. Humans are manipulators, and as deciding the fate in a piece of land, either to conserve it for infrastructure and development, and the population of species could decrease with a smaller amount of land to live on. That's what we came up with, Ms. Diatley.
So for the rest of your group, do you guys have anything else to add? Assuming that's a no. Yeah, so this is interesting. So it's really complex topic in that we've got several areas that are probably not developable, but are definitely home to some critical species. And so those critical species could be things that are threatened or endangered. And so those two those two words have very different meanings. They also have very different regulations around them. And so that is one of the things that is kind of a hard issue about this whole thing, is that if there is an endangered or a threatened species in one of these areas, that automatically brings in a whole lot of extra regulation for that area. And so part of that could be, a lack of grazing. And if we have a lack of grazing, there could be, long-term effects of, increase in fire danger, increase in invasive species, and those type of things. And so it's really important that as people are making these decisions, that they're keeping the whole ecosystem in mind. And so those are some of the things that are coming up with the critical habitat designation. So fantastic. Thank you guys. That was a good summary, and I like your pros and cons. So, all right. How about group 2? Are you guys ready to share your topic?
Could we have like 5 more minutes?
Nope, you cannot.
No,
because we only have 5 minutes left.
What we have.
Yep.
Okay, I'll give you what we have.
It doesn't have to be perfect, guys. It's just got to be a rundown.
Okay, so ours was talking about setting aside protected scenic areas and wilderness areas, about 288,000 acres in San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and the national forest down there.
Los
I can't
Pinos,
remember
yep.
the name. Yes, that
Or
forest.
Los Padres.
So the pros for that, we put so the protection from the development in those areas, their definition was they could develop in the scenic areas that enhanced, conserved, and protected the resources. So I felt like that was beneficial for the biotic components on the rangeland. We also talked about how that could possibly promote the biodiversity in the areas protected. It would help reduce the habitat loss. And they also talked about protecting the stream areas. So we thought that would protect the riparian areas and prevent loss around those. And then it allowed for the undeveloped land to not be developed on, even though they said there was an area where an oil drilling was already in place and that area wasn't going to be under the protection, which I thought about when you talk about multiple use, how that can also be sort of a beneficial thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then so some cons, we put like the non-management of 79,455 wilderness acres could increase in fire danger. And we weren't sure if in designated wilderness areas, if you were allowed to graze or not. So that's what we were talking about when we got cut off. And then, so with the increase of fire danger, we put like you would need the human component would need to manage more intensely as each ecosystem responds differently to management practices. So that would be like an added extra human component that maybe wasn't there before, but could also be a pro because it may be needed.
Yeah.
And then
Cool.
that was where we left off.
Yeah, some big stuff happening, right? Like this, almost 300,000 acres in California is significant. And so the areas that we're talking about, let me just share my screen really quickly because there was a link in this article, is down here in kind of San Luis Obispo County, Santa Barbara County. And this is definitely the coastal mountains, and there isn't a ton of diversity and vegetation in this area. So in this part of the state, you're getting really shallow in soil and hardpan. You're also in some pretty extensive foothill areas. So there's probably some shrubs there and a lot of annual grasses, but not necessarily a ton of trees in certain parts of this. And so one of the issues here from an grazing ecology standpoint is if this Protection Act was designated, and then what would potentially end up happening is if it was protected in quote unquote monument status, that means that basically no management would take place. So it would be very similar to like national parks. So if you guys have followed the Dixie Fire at all that went through Lassen Park, if a fire goes through a national park, they can only fight it to a certain extent. They can't go in and clean up after it. They can't go back in and replant. It has to stay in just a static condition, and where nature drives the rehabilitation part of it. And so that would also occur here with monument status. And so that gets a little bit tough because there's a lot of cattlemen down in this area. There's a lot of sheep producers in this area as well. And so that would eliminate grazing of domestic species in the certain areas. It also may eliminate the ability to create wildlife management areas in these areas as well. So we would reduce our ability to kind of manage some of the wildlife species. And so all of those kind of tools that we use to manage rangeland can really affect the ecology. It can affect the soil, the vegetation that grows there, the rate of invasive species that come in. And in this neck of the woods, fire is a really, really big concern as well. And so again, it's a large populated area with potentially no vegetation management from a grazing perspective. And so that just will has the potential to foster a lot of fine fuel growth. And so that's a big concern for producers in this area. So great.
What is it currently classified as? That's what we were trying to also figure out.
So it's interesting. So part of it is state land, but the part that falls in the Los Piedras National Forest is just designated as national forest land. And so what they're trying to do is which means that it's federally managed, right? Or federally lack thereof managed. And so what they're wanting to do is take this area that is in that national forest area and just change the designation. So it has either monument status or it's conserved to some extent. And so, a potential of this is that it would change who manages it and who's oversees it. So it would be taking it out of out of the Forest Service and putting it into Bureau of Land Management. That's a potential solution. What happened? The problem with this is that it's not a blanket ownership, right? It's checkerboard ownership. So there's not only federal land here, there's state land and there's private land. And so if you're a private landowner and you get overlaid as that monument status, you automatically fall into monument status, which means that from a private property rights standpoint, your ability to manage your land has also been taken away just because they switched designations on you. And so that's why this stuff is really, really important, and why it's really good to have lobbying groups like Public Lands Council in place, because they can help kind of fight these regulations. And the part that I like about Public Lands Council compared to other advocacy agencies is that Public Lands is committed to education. So they like to change or lobby through education and not through backdoor deals, implementing riders into other bills in kind of a kickback situation, that type of thing. So that some of the other companies will actually do. So anyway, it's just it's something that came up, and I wanted to talk about these two issues because they actually have a lot to do. The political issue of it has the potential to really affect ecology, and that's what I want you guys to know about. And so I have a high value for making sure that we're talking about current events in this class as well. So because the stuff doesn't go away, it always comes up over and over and over again. All right, well, guys, I'm sorry I've kept you 2 minutes over. So please just keep in mind that we are meeting for lab on Wednesday. Please be on time at 2 p.m. And then you've got a quiz and a guest speaker article that will come from Wednesday, due on Friday. All right, I'll hang out for just a couple of minutes and then and answer any questions you guys have. And I will plan on seeing you Wednesday, if not before. Thank you, guys.